And we're alive. welcome, welcome to the fourth live stream. I started doing these live streams on Monday, now it's Thursday. And, as I mentioned on the first episode, obviously I want to get to a point where we have a large enough viewership that people start calling in and we talk about their financial struggles and I offer my experiences, my knowledge. I mention everything that I went through, and then hopefully that can help some people. So today, because obviously this is still new, this whole concept that I've come up with, we don't have enough people that are even watching, never mind calling in. So until we get to that point, I'm going to cover certain topics, finance topics, obviously, and I'm going to discuss, essentially it's always about the mistakes that I made and how I overcame them because I want you to be able to relate. That's one thing. It's one thing for me to give other people's stories and stuff from books, and it's like, yeah, I guess there's value in it. I mean, sure, you can learn stuff from it, but it's much more different when it comes from personal experience because then you see that somebody else went through it. The person who's telling you about this theory went through it and he's got some experience and this is how he overcame it, in a real world scenario. So that maybe it could help you. Maybe it could be something that's worth looking into and that could turn your financial situation around. And what I wanted to do today was talk about biggest financial mistakes that people make and especially that I've made. And I'm going to talk about it. And then also, there's an article that I wrote probably last year on finishfirstfinancially.com called the biggest financial mistake to avoid. So there's many mistakes that you want to avoid when trying to improve your finances, but there was one in particular that kind of drained me, and I think it's draining a lot of people. And the reason that people have this expense is mostly because of status and comfort. And this is what I keep talking about over and over again because it's such a big part of messing up financially. And I'll eventually get to a live where I'm just speaking about status and comfort. But this mistake is a big part of it. And the mistake is buying a car that you can't afford. Generally, if if I could go back in time, I would just buy a car that I could afford for cash, and don't have any vehicle finance that I have to pay every single month. Ideally, I want to be in a situation where I don't need a car at all, where I'm working from home or I'm using public transportation. And all of these scenarios that I've laid out has happened to me, by the way. So let's start at the beginning where I made a big mess, right? Specifically with regards to buying a car. When I was a student, my dad got me an Opel Monza 1984 model. But this car was like in really good condition. And I was involved in 6 accidents with it, believe it or not. Only the first time was my fault. The other 5 times I was hit. And this car just kept going and going. It was an unbelievably strong car. And, while I was a student, it was nice. But then once I graduated and I got a decent paying job in finance, I wanted to upgrade because of that status and comfort thing that I mentioned. And I got a sports BMW first. It was a M Sport or something like that. And obviously, I couldn't afford it. I just started working, but I wanted it. I felt I deserved it. I worked hard. So I financed it. And that car I had it for about can't even remember, let's say 2 years, 2.5 years, maybe something like that. 2 years. And I kept it in good condition, washed it every single week, and I was making payments on it. Everything was fine. Obviously, along with those the vehicle finance payments, there's gas, there's repairs and maintenance, there's registration and all kinds of things that come along with that. And after that car, I decided to upgrade to a luxury BMW. I sold that M Sport and I made about, I think, $2,000 profit on it. And I thought, well, yeah, I mean, I'm driving a nice car, and eventually, and at the end, I've made a nice profit for it. Why don't I upgrade? So I did that. I got a luxury BMW, and the vehicle, with the vehicle finance payments, gas, repairs and maintenance, and all of these other things, my total expense for this vehicle was 30% of my salary. That is nuts. And the worst part is that many people are in a similar situation, if not worse. I think there's, the average car payment for a used vehicle in America is $500. For a new one, it's $700. Just think about that. Now, that's just the vehicle payment for your finance. Now, what about your gas and all the other things that come along with car ownership? So that expense could easily be $1,000 and more. So just think about what percentage of your salary that is that you're dedicating to something that is depreciating every single year. You're losing money on it, but yet you keep pouring money into it. And one of the mistakes that people made, that I made as well, is with the calculation of when you buy it and when you sell it. You think, so let's say, you bought a car for $10,000 and you managed to sell it for $7,000. And at the time, the car's value was $6,000. So you think, okay, the market value is $6,000. I got $7,000. So I actually made a profit of $1,000. And first of all, that's just not the case, because you bought it at 10 and now you're selling it for 7. So there already is a $3,000 loss. But what's even worse is that we don't account for all of those expenses that were required to run that vehicle. So you needed, in order to enjoy it, you needed to put gas into the vehicle. You needed to service it. You needed to put new tires. So every single expense that you accumulated throughout the years for that vehicle is what you actually need to add on top of the purchase price to get the real amount, the actual amount that this so-called asset has cost you. That's the true cost of this vehicle. It's not just the buying price. That's also very pertinent to real estate, because people that buy, let's say, residential property, which they never let out, they just live in that place. They buy a house, they live in it, and let's say they bought the home for $300,000. A couple of years later, they sell it for $400,000. They think they made $100,000 on this house. But what about the electricity, water, the taxes, the repairs and maintenance? When the window broke, you had to replace it. When the plumbing gave out, you had to fix it. All of those expenses that were required for you to live in that house is the actual true cost of it. That's how you determine how much you really made or lost. It's not just the buying price minus the selling price. So, even though I say, now I'm coming back to what I said about selling my first BMW and making $2,000 on it. Well, no, I mean, once I take into account all of the other expenses that come with it, I made a loss. There's no doubt about it. So I get this luxury BMW. It's 30%, total expenses are 30% of my income. I think I'm cool. My friends are saying, man, this is a really a fancy vehicle. How can you afford it? Well, I actually can't. And I know I can't because I financed it. That's how you know whether or not you can afford something is if it's financed. A big mistake that people who take out debt make is that they think because they're able to make the monthly payments on this debt that they can afford it. No, the fact that you took out debt shows that you can't afford this thing, whatever it was that you bought. So don't think that just because you're making the minimum payments or more that you can afford this. No, no, no. The only way you can afford something is if you have cash, and preferably have cash to buy it 2 or 3 times. When you buy, let's say, a car, you don't want to dedicate all of your savings to this car. You want to buy a car and still have significant savings after that. The point of savings isn't to deplete it. It's to invest it so that your money grows. But if you're going to use a portion of it to buy something, then it has to be just a small percentage of that savings. I say, just my personal rule is that your car's value should be 1% of your net worth. 1%. So if you want to buy a car that is $10,000, your net worth should be $1 million. Why do I say that? Why do I use 1%? Because anything higher than that is just crazy. You're losing money. Remember, this is I don't even want to call it an asset because it's not, but let's say it's an asset that depreciates. You're losing money. There's a few cars that will appreciate, sure, but in most cases, people buy cars that depreciate. So you're losing money on this, and since that's the case, you want to lose as less money as of your net worth. So that's why you start at 1%, and then it just keeps going lower than 1%. So the most that you've lost on this vehicle is 1% of your net worth. That's why I say, if you're going to buy a car, buy one that is 1% of your net worth. People who are driving cars that are $30,000, $40,000, many of them do not have a net worth of $3-4 million. They are in negative, if anything. But that's the choice that they made. That's up to them. They can do whatever they want with their lives, but their car is one of the biggest reasons that they do not have money. That the reason they're living paycheck to paycheck. So, coming back to my car, I got this luxury BMW costing me 30% of my income, and I eventually opened up a nightclub, and I got into so much debt. Eventually ended up getting fired from the nightclub that I started. And I had a lot of debt. Now I had no income because I was fired, and I had no savings. And what happened is just before, a couple of months before I got fired, probably about 4 months before that, the car broke down, and I didn't have. It was the maintenance plan had already expired, so I couldn't use that, and I had no money to fix it. So the car was just sitting in the garage, and I get fired from the nightclub and eventually get evicted as well from my place because I wasn't paying rent. I wasn't paying the car payments 1 or 2 months, and then I'd pay, and it was like very inconsistent. And now, because I'm leaving my place, I need the car to work. So I knew a mechanic close to my place. He had fixed my car several times before that. I couldn't pay him. He fixed my car. And since I couldn't pay him, I gave him my furniture. So that was, that was a low point in my life. But at least I had a running car. So I put my stuff in my car with nowhere to go. I parked my car on the side of the road, close to where I was living, a few blocks down so that the people where I used to stay wouldn't see me. And 2 or 3 days later, after being on the street, the car breaks down again. The mechanic hadn't done a proper job. He took a shortcut. The car broke down. So now I had a broken car, a broke down car, and no money to fix it. And I just sold. I gave him my furniture to fix the car, and that didn't work out. And I just realized, how much hassle having that car gave me. It was just a tremendous amount of hassle, and it cost me so much money that. And what was strange about it is that at that point, when I stopped, eventually, once I was on the street, I had no money and I completely stopped paying the car. So that was now about 3 or 4 months of consecutive payments that I'd missed. Up until that point, I'd paid the car for like over 4 years. Must have been, let's say 4 years and 3 months. I had about another 9 months until I was going to fully pay it off. And before this whole thing that happened with my nightclub, my credit was immaculate. I used to apply for vehicle finance over the phone from a bank, like not even talk to a consultant, talking to a bot, just like putting in numbers over my keypad, and they would approve my credit literally within minutes after I hung up. It was such good record. I paid my debts every single month without a hassle for months, for years. And then when this whole thing happened with my nightclub that I got fired, I didn't have any money, so I just didn't pay, and then my credit went to the dogs. So now I was 3 or 4 months behind on payments, and the bank is calling me. We want to take the car back. Can you make any kind of payment? Just anything, please. They didn't even really want to go through this whole process of repossessing the car. They were actually really nice about it. And there was something that the one gentleman said to me from the bank, which I'll share with you, which was really profound. Actually, it relates a lot to personal finance. So I couldn't make the payment, and another month went by, and they came to collect the car. And at that time, a friend of mine had found out about my situation and offered me a place to stay. So when my car got repossessed, I was fortunate enough to be at my friend's place. So I wasn't out on the street. So now when I look back on this whole fiasco, when I got this car, costing me 30% of my salary, all of these repairs, and then broke down again. And then at the end of it all, just before, a couple months before I was supposed to pay off this entire car, it gets repossessed. Was it worth me pulling up to a traffic light and somebody being impressed with my car? Or my friend saying, oh, wow, that's a real slick vehicle, that's amazing that you drive it. Was it worth just that feeling for a couple of minutes to go through the months and months of hassle, of incurring expenses, of having these headaches, and then eventually having it repossessed, which took such a mental and emotional toll on me? Was it worth all of that? No, it wasn't. It absolutely wasn't. It's crazy how much importance and value I placed on owning a vehicle. It's almost like I attached my entire image, my entire worth, a big portion of my worth as a human being to owning a fancy vehicle, because I wanted people to portray me as being successful. And this car was the symbol of my so-called success. It wasn't really success, because if I was successful, I would be able to buy this car for cash. I financed it. I couldn't afford it, but I wanted to portray the image of success. So I took out vehicle finance and I bought a car which I couldn't. I was making, I was making the payments for 4 years and 3 months while I was receiving an income back when I had a job. But then once I opened up a business and got fired, had no income, had no savings, and a mountain of debt, couldn't make payments on it anymore. And then that's when everything went downhill. Now, let's say I had paid off the car, the 5 years that I had this loan for, and I'd paid it off. And you might say, geez, you were just like a few months away from, kind of being, getting over that hurdle, that hump, and then everything would have been fine. But I don't believe that to be the case, because I'd conditioned myself to be a spender. So what happened when I got that M Sport BMW first? I drove it for a bit, and then I made a so-called profit on it. And then I got this bigger vehicle, now the luxury BMW. Let's say I paid it off. What would have happened after that? What would have been the thoughts going through my mind? I would have thought, let me get an even better BMW or something even more extravagant. Let me go for a Porsche or something, because I've got that reference experience that I've paid off this vehicle finance. So why not just take out another one? Why not have this? Why am I not connected? This is not making sense. Sorry about this. Why is it doing this? Excuse me for a second. Sorry about that. Seems like the software just, these applications, you never know what can happen with them. I'll have to look into that so it doesn't happen again. So speaking of, getting a bigger vehicle, what mindset is important when regarding finances. So, if I had paid off that debt, I would have gotten a better vehicle. So that would have just meant having more vehicle finance, more debt, and more pressure would have been, bestowed upon me, if I could say it like that. And I might have felt cool, being in a bigger vehicle, and I would have portrayed that even a bigger image of success, which was just phony, because that vehicle would have been financed. And what would have ended up happening is that I would just be in a perpetual cycle of debt, because I took out one vehicle finance, I paid it off, and I took out a second one, then I would take out a third one, and then it would just never end. I'll probably just die with debt. Yeah, that would have been my life, the entire process that I would have played out if I'd continued to take out vehicle finance. So in a way, you could say, fortunately for me, this whole charade with me not being able to pay the car and having it repossessed was kind of a blessing in disguise. Because when I reached rock bottom, that's when I hit rock bottom, I needed to make drastic changes. When you become so uncomfortable, that's when you start to make drastic changes. Until you're not that uncomfortable, then you don't really make any drastic changes. And because I was homeless, there was just nothing, there's nothing deeper, no deeper level to go, nothing lower to stoop to, So I had to make a change. And the best part about me becoming homeless is that I just didn't care what people thought of me. I didn't care that I didn't have this fancy car anymore. It actually became a burden to me. It was just, owning a vehicle. When I thought about it, one of the biggest reasons that I got into this entire mess is because I owned a vehicle. I owned an expensive vehicle, which I couldn't even afford. So it became something that I viewed as an obstacle to financial freedom. And because I viewed a vehicle as this obstacle on my journey towards being debt free and building savings, I no longer wanted to have a vehicle. Fortunately, at that time, I became a freelancer. I got a job as a writer, writing online. So I was working from home. I didn't really need to go anywhere on a daily basis. I'd go to the shops once a week, and I'd also go to the gym daily, but I used public transportation. So I was fortunate not to have that 30% of my income taken away from me. That's just think about that. If you are making $10,000 and you're spending 30% on a vehicle, that's $3,000. And if you're making less than that, the numbers just get even more drastic, and it's frightening. So not having a car for several years, especially while I was in debt, and when I started accumulating savings, just helped me tremendously. I didn't have monthly payments for vehicle finance, no gas, no repairs and maintenance, no licensing fees, none of that. That's a tremendous amount of money. And especially when you own a used vehicle and you don't have any warranty on it, and then it breaks down, and now you have to replace certain parts, which just for a BMW, they're really expensive. And any other cars, I mean, it's just ridiculous. So not having to incur those expenses helped me to dedicate that money to debt. So it helped me to pay off my debts a lot quicker. And coming back to what I said about the gentleman from the bank, while my car was being lifted onto the tow truck, he said to me, he was asking me questions. Do you have an income? And I said, no, I'm unemployed. And he felt bad for me. And he said to me, the same way it takes time to go down, it takes time to come up. And that's actually really profound if you think about it. Because when he said that to me, I later realized that applies to personal finance. Rarely does anybody fail financially overnight. It's a process that happens throughout several months or years. You go down a bit, and then you get used to that lower level, and then you go down a bit more, and then you get used to that level. Next thing you know, a couple months later, you're not able to make payments on your credit. You're not able to make payments on your credit cards, on your vehicle finance. You just barely covering your rent, and you're wondering, how did you get here? Well, the answer is that it was a gradual decline. It happened through months and years, and you just kind of got used to that lower level, and you thought, oh, well, it's slightly uncomfortable, but now I've become used to it. Then you go down a bit more. Well, it's a bit more uncomfortable, but you get used to that as well after some time. And then that's just how the process carries on until eventually you hit rock bottom like I did. And that's really what I'm trying to prevent, is by sharing this information, by telling you my story. I'm hoping that you're going to make the change immediately. I'm hoping that you're not going to let things, get to a point where it's so bad that you don't even know what you're going to do next. While you still have an income, while you still kind of able to cope, make that change now before it gets really, really bad. Yeah, I think the sooner that you make the change, the easier it's going to be. The path to recovery will be much simpler than when you're right at the bottom where I was. I'd barely some money. I think I had about $100 for food. That was the only money that I had, and it had to stretch because I didn't know when I was going to receive an income, and I had nothing. I had $40,000 of debt, no savings, and I'm living on the street. Don't let that happen to you. Look at why you have this scar. Instead of having a vehicle that is $20,000, $30,000 or whatever it is, if it's finance, that means you can't afford it. Consider selling it and buying something for cash if you must have a vehicle. Like I said to you, I went through several stages where I had a fancy car, that I didn't have a car at all, and I used public transportation. Why is it so difficult for you to make that change? Why can't you use public transportation? And if there really isn't any public transportation in your area, why not opt for saving up $2,000 or $3,000, $4,000 at max and buying a vehicle for cash? And you can find a reliable Toyota or Honda for $3,000, $4,000. Those cars are usually very good. As long as you look after it, it will look after you. So that's something to consider. I think that's important. Yeah, because if you don't have any vehicle finance payments every single month, then that's just significant amount of money. In most cases, at least $500 that you're able to dedicate to debt. That's $6,000 a year. And that's just the vehicle finance payment. Just remember that. As I mentioned, there's other expenses that come along with it. What if it's $1,000 in total that you're able to save every single month? From just not having that one expense, you're no longer living paycheck to paycheck. You've got that $1,000 that you're putting away towards debt, towards savings, whatever it is. Most American families don't even have $1,000 saved, like at all. There's nothing there. But you could have, by not having a vehicle finance, you could have $1,000 saved every single month, and that's a great start. First of all, financially, but also emotionally and mentally, because once you see that $1,000 that you're able to dedicate towards debt, and you see this balance dropping by $1,000, by this additional $1,000, your debt is going down, you feel more motivated to look for other expenses that you can reduce or eliminate, so that you can dedicate more money towards debt or dedicate more money towards savings. So that's one of the great things of not having this expense and just being able to put that money towards debt or savings. People's fascination with cars, as I mentioned at the beginning, it's all about status and comfort. That's really what these cars represent. It's about pulling up to a traffic light and somebody being impressed by your vehicle, thinking that you're successful. But they don't know that you've financed those cars and you're actually struggling. The fact that you've got vehicle finance and a credit card, oh, jeez. You are, I don't want to say in a world of mess, because you can sell that car and you can pay off that credit card, but you need to do it. That's the thing. That's the really the key factor to making that change, is you actually need to do it. You need to make that change. And the reason people don't want to make that change is because that status and comfort that they get from the vehicle just feels so good. What if they get rid of the car? What are people going to say? John is now no longer successful because he was driving a Mercedes, but now he's driving some old Toyota. What's happening there? He's going down. Actually, John has made a very wise decision, and shortly after that payment, or maybe a few months or a few years after buying that second-hand vehicle with cash, he's on his way to financial freedom because he no longer has this vehicle finance payment every single month. Instead, he's dedicating that towards paying off his debt. And then once that debt is paid off, he's going to have money for his savings, which is going to grow and then put into investments. So John has actually made a brilliant decision, which most people are afraid to make. He doesn't care what others are going to think of him because he no longer drives that Mercedes. He's not consumed with thoughts of people being impressed by him and thinking that he's successful because he's driving a certain vehicle which he can't afford. No, instead, John thinks that he is growing his net worth by not having vehicle finance and by reducing his debt and increasing his savings. That's what John's doing. What are you doing? Driving around in some car, you're thinking you're so cool, like it represents your whole life. Oh my God, you've attached your entire identity to this car. That's what it looks like. At least that's what it was for me. And I'm sure that it is the case for many other people. I think for many people who are struggling financially, growing their net worth should be a much bigger priority than having a vehicle that they can show off. Stupid. Guys, it's stupid, honestly. You really think about it. I placed such a big, it was such a big priority for me. And at the time when I was buying these cars, I thought I was so cool that now, after having gone through this whole experience with these cars and what happened to me, I now see them as something that's holding me back from financial freedom. And I don't want that. I don't want anything that's going to stop me from being debt-free and from having significant savings and investments. No, I would much rather use public transport. I would much rather walk than have a vehicle finance payments every single month and be in debt and wonder how I'm going to get by and just be in this perpetual cycle of being in debt. It's crazy. You don't have to live that way. And if you really want to feel emotional bliss, that's what I call it, because that's what it feels like. Once you've paid off your debt, you're debt free. It's like you just don't have this mental torment. It's this proverbial chain that comes off your shoulders around your neck, and you just toss it away, and like your lungs are no longer clogged up. You're not tense anymore. You feel relaxed. That's what it's like when you're debt free and you've got savings and you're not worried about how you're going to cover your expenses next month. Isn't that much more important than being in some car that you can't afford? Okay, let's get to this article that I wrote on finishfirstfinancially.com. You can read this article and others, all for free, obviously, on the site. You can also get my book, Finish First Financially, From Homeless to Debtless with Savings. That's the name of the book. It documents all of my experiences, and I talk about the car and everything. Obviously, everything that I say on this show is not financial or investment advice. It's just me sharing my experiences. It's for entertainment purposes. But, if you find some value from my story and you want to implement it into your life to improve your financial situation, then great. So let's go through the article. I wrote, I've done plenty of stupid things with money. We've all made a financial mistake that made us question our reasoning for taking that path. But I've noticed one common money mistake among many people suffering financially. We should agree that debt is bad, but a particular form of financing is the difference between living paycheck to paycheck and having several $100s at the end of the month. Yeah, that's what I just spoke about now. What's one of the biggest financial mistakes? Taking out vehicle finance is one of the most common financial mistakes preventing you from saving money. I would say that owning a car is one of the financial pitfalls to avoid, even if purchased with cash. Well, this is now obviously saying the ideal scenario is if you're working from home and you don't need a car and you're using public transportation. But if you do need a car, then at least put money away every single month, $100, $150, $200 a month until you're able to afford that $3,000 or $4,000 car with cash. The average American pays $700 in monthly car payments for a new car and $500 for a used one. Keep in mind those figures exclude gas, insurance, repairs, and tire replacements. With those expenses factored in, the average American is spending around $1,000 on their car monthly. Jeez. I haven't even I haven't read this article since I wrote it, which was about a year ago. So I'm just the amounts that I mentioned with the $1,000. Now here they creep up again in this article. Just think about it, having an extra $1,000 every single month. Think about, and I wrote that now. Think about how good it will feel to have an extra $1,000 at the end of the month after paying all your living expenses. In a year, that's $12,000, which is more than what a lot of people have in savings. $12,000 in 1 year, 10 years, $120,000. And you might say, well, oh, geez, 10 years to only have $120,000. That's nothing. That's more than what you would have had if you hadn't done this exercise. $120,000 is what happens if you do this at the very minimum after 10 years, which is time that was going to pass anyway. So you might make use of that time and have $120,000 after 10 years, as opposed to having nothing. I used to be a financial moron who valued cars more than savings. My monthly car expense was more than my rent. Yeah, it was. Talk about stupid. My first purchase was a sports BMW followed by a luxury BMW. My car was one of the reasons I ended up homeless. Yes, I really did live in the street. I was completely broke, so I parked my BMW on the side of the road and lived in it after being evicted from my apartment. If that wasn't bad enough, I had defaulted on 3 months of payments and the bank repossessed the car. The car payments are digging you into a financial rut. Stop sinking deeper and start making your way out. So the way to get yourself out of that situation is to sell that car, pay off the vehicle finance, and then if you really need a car, you save up for it and you pay cash, and then that's it. The reason you made one of the worst money mistakes, you just had to buy that cool daily driver to get around, didn't you? Actually, you didn't. You did it because the car gave you status and comfort. How could you possibly use public transport, walk, or carpool? I mean, those transportation means are below you. You're just so cool in your car, aren't you? Not really. It's draining you financially, and nobody thinks that broke people are cool. 6 years have passed since my car was repossessed. Well, now it's 7. And I haven't owned another one. I've got cash to buy a nice car, but I'm not a financial moron anymore. I've saved several $100s every month for the last 6 years by not owning one. I use public transport and taxis when the former isn't available. Sure, buses can suck sometimes because of loud people and overloading, but it saves me a lot of money, so I'm prepared to sacrifice the comfort a car provides. You enjoy getting in your car outside your home and arriving exactly at your destination. I have to walk to the bus stop, and after the bus drops me off. The opposite sex might check you out in your fancy car while I get no attention from women while walking. but I save money because I don't have a car, while you own a liability that costs you monthly. Just think about it. Not only is your car losing value, but you're funding every ride. Owning a car is definitely one of the money mistakes to avoid. But if you've already made that mistake, you can correct it by not caring about your status and becoming less comfortable. How to fix the financial mistake known as your car. If you work remotely, there's no reason for you to own a car. The only time you should own a car is if you use it to generate an income, such as deliveries and taxi rides. So in that case, your car becomes an asset because it's generating you income. Sure, there's expenses to it to generate that income. Well, same as any other business. Show me a business that doesn't have any expenses. So your car, if used to generate income, will have expenses, but the income that you derive from that should be higher than your expenses. And then in that case, your car becomes an asset. Otherwise, sell it. At the very least, downgrade to a more affordable car if it's crucial for you to own one. Selling a car you own is easier than the one you financed. Let me just read it. Selling a car you own is easier than the one you financed. Okay, how do you get rid of it if the vehicle finance is higher than the car's worth and you have no savings? Okay, so what I meant there is, if let's say you're in this financial spot where you've got a financed vehicle and you want to sell it, but the outstanding amount on the loan is higher than what the car's worth. So you're going to be in a negative if you had to sell it. You have to now supplement that shortfall. So let's see. That's the first issue, but you then still have to buy another car since you insist. I would rather you didn't buy another one, but if you must, it's going to be with cash. Although I recommend paying off the lowest debt first to build momentum, I suggest tackling vehicle finance first because it's a huge expense holding you back financially that can be corrected fairly quickly. There are other debts you also need to trim, but your car is killing you. I really believe that your financial progress is dependent on settling the vehicle loan. The sooner you settle the vehicle finance, the more money you'll have to dedicate to other debts. Getting rid of vehicle finance. Find out the exact balance on your car loan and the value of your car. Speak to dealers and also place an ad to gauge how much the market is prepared to pay for your vehicle. And then I wrote, if the car's value is lower than the vehicle finance balance, you have to decrease other expenses and dedicate the savings to a fund that will pay off the car debt and buy another affordable car. That sounds overwhelming, but it becomes easier when you take it one step at a time. So what I'm saying is you now have vehicle finance. The balance is higher than your car's market value, but you want to sell it. So what you're essentially going to have to do is you're going to have to reduce your other expenses so that you've got more money so that you're putting it away in this fund until you've got enough money in that fund to supplement that shortfall. So let's say your vehicle finance loan, the outstanding balance on it is $3,000 and your car's value is $2,000. You're going to keep saving money. You're going to keep trimming other expenses so that you can put money into this fund until it grows so that you've got $1,000. Then once you sell your car for $2,000, you've got another $1,000 to pay off this $3,000 debt. But that doesn't mean that you're going to have money for another vehicle. So then you'll have to decrease more expenses in that case and just save up longer. Where was I? The affordable car should be only a few $1,000s. I know that means it's not going to be what you want or are used to. Forget about status and comfort. You worried about those two factors for far too long, and they are the reason for your financial hardship. Let's assume that your car's value is $10,000 lower than the outstanding vehicle finance, and the other car you will buy is $3,000. Yes, you can get decent cars for $3,000. They will be old, but a Toyota or a Honda is available in that price range. That means you need to save $13,000 to settle the vehicle finance and buy another car. Saving that amount should not take longer than a year. If you live from paycheck to paycheck, you're wondering how you can ever save that amount. 2 ways. Reduce all your other expenses and sell stuff. You have to live on a minimalist budget. That means you cannot eat out, buy clothes, have subscriptions, or spend money on entertainment. You're in survival mode. And that means spending money only on expenses necessary for survival and debt to avoid blacklistings and lawsuits. There's no doubt in my mind that you will save several $100s monthly by excluding non-essentials from your budget. Absolutely. Just think about how much you spend on takeouts, on subscriptions, on going out. That's already $700, that you can put towards this fund so that you can pay off your vehicle finance. You also have to sell stuff from your home. You need cash, not stuff. So stop hoarding that stuff. Get rid of it. The reason that you're in this financial mess is because of that stuff. It's hindering you from paying off your debt, from having savings. So get rid of these things that are hindering you from getting to the destination where you want to be. It's very simple. You can't have both. You can't have the stuff and the money. You got to get rid of the stuff to have the cash. The stuff took cash away from you. So now it's time to get the cash back from the stupid stuff you bought. Grab a pen and paper. Check every item in your house and list the ones that you don't need. It should be most of them. You can even sell clothing, but definitely golf clubs, extra TVs, and stuff you don't use often. Those must be on the list. Host a garage sale and list the items online. You need to sell that stuff ASAP and add the money to the car fund. After reducing your expenses for several months and selling your stuff, you should have enough to settle the vehicle finance and buy a $3,000 car. Could take you a year, maybe even longer, but you know what? At least you're working towards it. This is the important thing. It feels long, it feels grueling, it feels like you're not getting anywhere, but you're working towards it, you're chipping away at it. And this is a year or year and a half of your life that was going to pass anyway. But make it count. Be productive during that period, and when the 18 months pass, you've gotten rid of this vehicle finance and you feel like you've accomplished something, as opposed to just being in a perpetual cycle of debt. Do something with your time. Okay, so I said, I realized that your car's value depreciated during the time you saved for the car fund, and you probably won't get the same amount for it as when you initially inquired. But remember that you have also been paying it off during that period. So you've been, during the 18 months that you've been throughout this process, you've also been decreasing the vehicle finance balance, even though your car's value has been decreasing as well, depreciating. So where was I? But remember that you have also been paying it off during that period. So the payment should offset the difference in the car's value. That should be more or less, that's in that ballpark. Pay the amount that will lower your vehicle finance balance to your car's value. Enough money should remain in the car fund for an affordable car. Final thoughts on the biggest financial mistake to avoid. Saving up enough money to pay off the vehicle finance and having cash for an affordable car will require you to adopt a minimalist lifestyle. Check out my post on how to stop living paycheck to paycheck and save a lot of money for a detailed guide to fast track your savings. You can read all of those blogs on finishfirstfinancially.com. Not having monthly car payments coupled with all the car expenses will free up hundreds of dollars for you to dedicate to consumer debt. Your car's expenses are preventing you from having savings, making you vulnerable to huge financial setbacks. Those headaches are not worth the status and comfort your car provides, so you need to settle your vehicle finance immediately. Making this financial decision will make you feel empowered and put you on the path to financial freedom. That's, what I said about the soul going through this whole experience of buying these cars and the torture and the torment that I went through because I had to fix them, and eventually losing the car, just wasn't worth it. It wasn't worth the hassle. So why go through that process? And if you're in that process, you obviously want to get out of it as soon as possible so that you can get on the path to financial freedom. That's what it's about. And it's just not worth it. Guys, it's absolutely not worth it. It's crazy the amounts that people are spending on these cars. And as I mentioned, I think it's good to recap some of the stuff that I said, which I feel is extremely important. And that is, if you're going to have a car, it should be 1% of your net worth. That the car's value should be 1% of your net worth, no more, because you're losing money on that car, and it's foolish to lose intentionally more than 1% of your net worth. If you're going to enjoy a car, then it should be only 1%. And if it's costing you anything more than 1% of your net worth, well, then how can you really enjoy it? It's decreasing your overall net worth. Why would you want that? Just for this feeling. It's not for me, and I think people who are in serious financial trouble should look at that. And this is easier said than done, because it comes back to decreasing your lifestyle. Going to a lower level, lower standard of living, and people don't want that because they've attached their identities and so much to these cars, that when I suggest that you get rid of the car, this fancy vehicle that you've got, and you don't buy a car at all, or you buy a secondhand car for $3,000, people get angry. They're like, oh man, you're insulting me. How can you say that? Why? I want this car, I deserve it, I worked hard for it. Well, you can't afford it. Can't afford it because you financed it. Why do you want this burden? Is the question that you should be asking yourself. Why do I need this? And the answer in most cases will be because I want status and comfort. And that's just not going to work. Forget about your ego, get rid of that, which is going to help you get rid of the status. You're going to have to become uncomfortable to make changes to lower your standard of living in order to get out of debt and build savings. That's what's required. And like I said to you, once I got rid of my vehicle, well, I had no choice. It was repossessed. But then after I had gotten out of debt and I had built savings, I had, significant amounts of money to buy a very fancy car with cash. But I didn't go down that road because I remembered where I was because of having a finance vehicle. And even though I wasn't going to finance it, had I bought another one, why would I take out that amount of money from my savings that I'd worked so hard to accumulate to buy a liability? It's depreciating. It's costing me all the time. No, I don't need that. I don't need it. At the moment, I am using a friend's car. He was kind enough to let me use it, but it's not something that I use every day. So, and obviously I'm in a much better financial spot today than what I was when I had vehicle finance. And now the only expense I really have is just petrol. That's it. So what can I tell you? Consider what I've said. See if it works for you. See if it doesn't. I think my personal experience should serve as a caveat, not to what can happen if you just keep in this perpetual cycle of debt. If you just keep buying these cars, you want to look flashier, you want to get into more and more debt. That's not your intention to get into more and more debt, but that's what happens when you want fancier cars and all of these other things that come along with status and comfort, and it just costs you so much, and it's unnecessary expenses. Make instead of trying to inflate your ego, how about deflating your debt balance and inflating your net worth? And I'll leave it at that for today. Thanks so much for listening, watching. Hopefully, you'll join me again tomorrow, Friday. Obviously, I do live streams Monday to Friday, 7 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's on YouTube, these live streams, and I'll post the recordings to Spotify and Apple iTunes or Apple, or what is it? Podcast Apple. I don't even know what it's called on Apple, something. But it will be there. And I'll catch you tomorrow again. Thanks for